Among the many books and articles written on U.S. history, few have taken an honest look at where we came from and how we got here. Most versions are nationalistic appraisals of the country's manifest destiny, full of metaphors and symbolic euphemistic phrases like melting pot or rugged individualism. Many important stories have been left out of our current renderings of our heritage as a nation. I present a brief explanation of the motivation behind George Armstrong Custer's last stand. Custer had actually been the only U.S. soldier willing to testify against President Ulysses S. Grant during an investigation into the administration's ties to cases of graft and corruption. Although President Grant, a former war hero, was never formally charged with complicity in this case, he continued to hold a grudge against Custer, who he considered to be a traitor to the administration. Time after time, Grant stubbornly blocked Custer's efforts to secure lucrative and prestigious military assignments. Custer, a very ambitious man, even sought a personal meeting with the president to win him over. Reportedly, Custer arrived in Washington, D.C. to speak with Grant, but after being forced to wait at the White House all day long, he was summarily dismissed and told that the president could not see him. As a result, the general came to believe that the only way he could regain the favor of the commander-in-chief was to become an even greater war hero himself. So, as commander of the 7th Cavalry, he led his men into an ambush at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. Custer led his regiment into battle even though the U.S. cavalry was vastly outnumbered by the enemy, and he had no reinforcements. Custer and the 7th Cavalry were sacrificed to warriors from the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho nations, whose leaders included Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. The Battle of Little Bighorn has been interpreted as a desperate attempt to impress the U.S. president for the benefit of Custer's own military ambitions, and possibly for his potential future political career. Custer had hoped he could win an important victory over great odds in order to further his personal aspirations. It's a sad tale told as a lesson in history about how blind ambition can lead to the slaughter of an entire regiment of cavalry soldiers. Have you ever heard about the real story behind the writing of the U.S. national anthem? Did you know that the Star-Spangled Banner was composed to the tune of a pagan-inspired drinking song? During the War of 1812, the second war between Britain and the United States, William Beans from Marlborough, Maryland, was captured by the Brits and held prisoner on a warship in Chesapeake Bay. Francis Scott Key and John S. Skinner were granted permission by President James Madison to act as negotiators in an effort to secure Beans' release. Key was then an attorney from Washington, D.C. But unknowingly, the two U.S. envoys had boarded the warship while the British were planning a full-scale bombardment of Fort McHenry as part of their plan to occupy Baltimore. So at that point, Francis Scott Key and Sullivan became prisoners of the British. The part of the story that most people haven't heard involves the origin of the melody for the U.S. national anthem. This happened after Key had printed up handbills with the lyrics he had written. He spread them all over Baltimore as part of the celebration of the U.S. defense of Fort McHenry. During a performance in Baltimore, an actor named Ferdinand Durang sang the words to the tune of an English song honoring the Greek hedonist Anacreon. Born in Ionia around 572 BC, Anacreon wrote poetry celebrating love and wine. The dude liked to party. It's interesting to ponder the fact that the melody Durang appropriated for the U.S. national anthem comes from a song inspired by a pagan lover and drinker. Here's another part of U.S. history which has received little recognition in the modern era. Anna Elizabeth Dickinson was a major U.S. reformer, abolitionist, and women's rights activist during the Civil War. She was a prodigy from the beginning, and her speeches attracted huge crowds. Anna's oratories condemning slavery often brought her audience to tears. For this ability, she was referred to as the movement's Joan of Arc. In the year 1860, Dickinson gave a rousing speech before the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. She was only 18 years old at the time, and the speech was so inspiring that she immediately became one of the most popular speakers on the East Coast circuit. In 1871, she began a campaign for women's rights, and in 1864, at the age of 22, she addressed the U.S. Congress and President Abraham Lincoln on the abolition of slavery. After the Civil War, Anna Elizabeth Dickinson championed the rights of women and African Americans. She gave lectures for many years for organizations called lyceums. These groups sponsored adult education programs across the country. You won't hear much about her in the U.S. public school textbooks, but Anna Elizabeth Dickinson inspired an entire generation of activists. Every day a new story is being told. It's up to us to discern which are merely tall tales told as political propaganda, and which ones are actual fact. Decoding the projected messages of the media and the education system is a vital part of truly understanding our world. The real stories are usually hidden in some dusty old document underneath a pile of boxes at the back of the bookstore, library, or archives. Our goal should be to recover these stories as we rediscover our past and our actual cultural heritage. Our challenge is to deprogram ourselves from the influence of those hypnotically, commercially controlled media images that we see every day. Those images are meant to control the image of ourselves and our neighbors, whether they be right next door or halfway around the world. Breaking free from that mass media control and the cultural stereotypes should be everyone's goal, so I suggest that we all keep digging for these untold stories, the ones that actually do define us as individuals and as a society. This is Mark Taylor Canfield with Untold Stories of the U.S. History.